What's going on, guys? Welcome back to my channel. Over the last few weeks, this pandemic has had a huge effect on the world as we know it, and I don't think any of us could have expected it. Now, during this really tough time, it's important that we all try and look after ourselves and look after our own health, as well as trying to do our bit to help others out where possible, as we're all going through the same thing and it's quite scary to say the least. Now, at the moment, there are a lot of countries under lockdown, which means a lot of people are having to stay in their houses for long periods of time, and I'm seeing online that a lot of people are getting really bored. But all they seem to be doing is wasting their time taking part in these social media challenges and sending a whole load of memes and joke videos about, which has got to a stage where it's so saturated that it just seems like a waste of time and people aren't even enjoying it anymore. Now, I know some of these challenges and joke videos are put out with the best intentions to try and lift people's spirits in this tough time. However, I just think it's got to that stage where people are just wasting their time and getting bored of it all, to be honest. Now, I don't mean for that all to come across sounding really negative, but in this video I just want to go over a few ways in which we can all use our time a bit more efficiently and actually use the lockdown as maybe an opportunity to learn something new or better ourselves in some way, rather than just wishing that there was no lockdown at all and you could go outside and see your friends or whatnot. Because the reality is, we're all under lockdown for the foreseeable future, so why not make the most of it? Even if you are still working but actually working from home, I still see this as a potential opportunity because the chances are you'll be saving commuting time, which you can then use productively for something else. Now, I understand there's a lot of people worried and nervous about what the future entails at the moment, but I think a good way of looking at it for your own mental well-being is to just keep pushing forward and trying to find some positives in each situation. It's always best to try not to worry about things that you can't actually change. And if it does make you feel better to know, me and my whole family have had the virus and we've all recovered and had fairly mild symptoms. But that being said, you never know how it's going to affect you as an individual, so just do your best to stay safe and follow the government guidance. On that note, let's keep moving forward and get into the video. Before we do so, if you haven't already, make sure you hit that subscribe button down below and click that bell so you never miss a video. But that being said, let's get into it. Okay, so the first thing I wanted to go over as a way we can all keep busy and use this time as an opportunity is basically to keep in control of your finances. Now, a lot of people don't really keep track of their finances all that well, and so with this time in lockdown, it's a really good opportunity to regain control of your finances. So the first step in gaining control of your finances, I think, is recording what your expenses are. Now, depending on how much detail you want to go into, it's kind of up to you. So there are really simple apps that you can get which keep track of all your spending. For instance, apps like Yolt, where you load up your bank accounts and credit cards and it keeps track of all of them and lets you know what you're spending your money on each month. Or if you want to go into more detail, you can literally keep track of all your expenses in a spreadsheet to potentially get more in-depth data. So once you're keeping track of your expenses, the next step is to reduce your spending. I think this is particularly important because at the moment there's a lot of uncertainty around, and it's just generally good practice to reduce your spending if you can. Now, I don't mean stop buying food and stop paying rent or anything like that. I more just mean have a look at your non-essential expenses and see where you can cut them down to save yourself a bit of money. Now, because of these unprecedented times, a lot of us may actually have reduced our spending without even meaning to. For instance, if you buy coffee every day on the way to work from somewhere like Starbucks or Costa, because a lot of those shops aren't open now due to the lockdown, you're probably actually saving yourself a lot of money each month by not going to those coffee shops and instead making your tea and coffee at home for a much cheaper price. So as well as reducing non-essential spending, I'd also look at your pay monthly services that you're signed up for. So this could be things like Netflix, Amazon Prime, Spotify, and whatever else. Now, I'm not saying to simply cancel all of these, just rather reevaluate what you're signed up for and do you actually use them or need them anymore. Because if you don't, you may be able to cancel a couple and save yourself a bit of money each month. And during this time, it's also a good opportunity to have a shop around and see if you're actually getting the best deals for your monthly bills. So for instance, your mobile phone contract, insurance and other monthly bills. And to put it simply, all you need to do is just have a shop around and make sure that you're actually getting the best deal out there. So now you're saving a bit more money each month, the next step is to save the difference. If you don't already have savings, a really good way to start is to reduce your spending like I just suggested and then save the difference. And it could actually build up surprisingly quickly depending on how ruthless you are. And so I think it's important to turn that money that you're now saving into an emergency fund. Now, I think this is relevant no matter how much money you have. If you already have a lot of savings already, it's still important to have an emergency fund. And so what I mean by an emergency fund is to basically have an amount of money that's readily available for you to access instantly, or in other words, funds that are liquid. So this could be an instant access, high interest savings account, rather than having all of your money tied up in something else like an investment or a property. So the purpose of this emergency fund is that if your income sources suddenly stop, you'll have a buffer of money that will keep you tied over for a period of time, rather than forcing you to sell assets or investments that you have potentially at a loss. Now, ideally, I think the bare minimum that you should have available is essentially 3 months worth of expenses, and this is to cover all of your mandatory monthly expenses, not including the non-essentials. So this will cover things like food, rent, mortgage payments, and commuting expenses maybe. So for example, if you spend £2,000 a month on these mandatory expenses, that you should then have saved £6,000 in your emergency fund that's instant access. But as I said, 3 months should really be viewed as a minimum to have as an emergency fund, and I think it's much better to strive to have 6 months worth of expenses saved. Now I think this is so important because none of us were expecting this pandemic, and a lot of businesses are now going bust and people are losing their jobs, and those without emergency funds, to put it simply, aren't going to be in a good way. But it's important to remember that this is relevant no matter how much money you have coming in each month. Because if you're spending all of your money as quickly as it's coming in, if something like this happens, you're just not going to be prepared if you don't have any savings. Now if you don't have any savings, the best thing to do is to simply just start, and as I said, reduce your spending and save the difference, because that's the easiest way to start building it up without having a huge impact on your life, and maybe aim to get a month's worth of expenses saved. So if you already have an emergency fund that you feel comfortable with, and an excess of savings, I think the next logical step to look at would be investing in the stock market. I think investing is one of the best ways you can actually get your money to work for you and actually generate yourself another income without you actually having to do an awful lot. Another good thing about investing in the stock market is that you don't actually need an awful lot of money to start out with, and you can start with as little as about £500. So the beauty of it is there are so many things that you can actually invest in the stock market. So you can find what works for you and simply just not bother with anything that you don't feel comfortable with. So what I personally like to do is to find long-term investments that I buy with the intention of holding for a number of years, which over time will increase in value, rather than making quick trades. So beginners usually look at ETFs or index funds that are designed to track the indexes. For example, the FTSE 100 or the S&P 500. However, I personally like to find actively managed investment trusts, as my aim is to overall try and beat the index. And to put it simply, all I look for is a fund manager that has a good track record, but also with an overall performance that backs them up. Now to me, a good performing fund is one that outperforms the index, or performs better than the other funds in the same sector. But the beauty of index funds and investment trusts is that they give you exposure to a number of different companies within the one fund, which in my view is a lot less risky than investing in an individual company. Now, as you all probably know, the stock market's been taking an absolute beating recently due to this pandemic and the uncertainty. In my view, pretty much any stock market crash is actually just a buying opportunity, as it creates a larger margin for it to bounce back and you to make a bit more profit. As based on previous market crashes, it always tends to bounce back. But it's important to remember that it's very difficult to buy at the exact right time. So it's much better in my opinion to, rather than go all in at once, is to just invest consistently with smaller amounts, so you gain exposure to the really good buying days as well as maybe the not so good ones. But from spending the time finding good things to invest in, hopefully you'll still be able to outperform the index and make some good profit. So the next thing I want to talk about that you could do is to plan a business. There are so many people out there that talk about their dream of owning a business and working for themselves, but they never actually turn it into a reality. More often than not, if you ask them why they haven't already started their business, you'll hear the same sort of excuses like I don't have the time, or they might just be scared of the business failing in general. But to me, with all this extra time, it seems like the perfect opportunity to get the groundwork started of your new business. Because it now means that that excuse of not having the time to start up a business is no longer relevant, as there is now a large proportion of people confined to their homes, not necessarily having any work to do. But the good thing is, hopefully you all still have access to the internet, which is basically all you need to start planning your business and doing some research. Now, I'm not necessarily saying that you'll be able to come up with a perfect business plan ready to launch as soon as this pandemic's over, but I'm just saying during this time of lockdown, you could get an awful lot done that would massively help you out in the long run. Now, I think some of the best businesses that you could start are those that earn passive income. So the idea behind passive income is that you put a lot of time in starting up the business and making sure that it's successful, but the actual business model allows you to scale back your time once it's established to then keep earning you the same amount of money each month, but without you having to use up as much of your own time. So the really good thing about this is that you can then get involvement with other opportunities out there and then eventually build up a network of income streams. So to me, I think the key to finding a business that can generate passive income is to think about scalability from the outset. So for example, say your business makes bespoke items, which only you as an individual knows how to create. To be able to scale this to generate more passive income, the only way of doing so is to employ other people and then teach them the trade, as this will then allow you to scale back your own time. But in comparison to if you're trying to do it all on your own, so you'll only be able to build a certain number of these bespoke items. So what I'm saying is basically just make sure you think about the scalability from the outset. So I think a good example of a passive income business is something like selling photos online. If you've already got a good catalogue of photos, you've already put the time and effort into the product. And then to put it simply, all you need to do is start an online website to allow the product to generate revenue. So then if you think about the amount of time you'll have to put into this long term, it's not actually going to be that much because it'll just be simply updating the website and maybe taking some more photos. Now, I'm not saying it's easy to become successful in this niche, I just think it's a good way of generating income from something you've already done that won't require a lot of your time going forward. So another great thing about starting a business is that because it's hopefully going to generate you another source of income, it puts a lot less pressure on your existing job, for instance. So for example, if you lose your job and your main source of income, at least you'll have something else to fall back on that will help tie you over, rather than just your emergency fund. A lot of people have been losing their jobs and a lot of businesses have been going under due to this pandemic, so to me that just emphasises how important it is to try and be as in control of your income as possible. So the unfortunate reality is a lot of people may have lost their jobs, and because a lot of companies aren't hiring at the moment because of these circumstances, starting a business may actually be a less risky option than you might think. And actually in some cases, having this added pressure can help turn your business into a success, as it might lead you to put in a lot more effort into thinking it all through and making sure that it'll actually work. So the next thing I want to talk about is learning a skill. So this point you can interpret in different ways. So you could be learning a skill just for fun, or it could be financially driven. But I personally believe it's really important to have a base level of competency in a wide range of different areas. And by simply having more knowledge about lots of different things, it can really set you ahead. People often use the saying that good at everything means good for nothing, which basically means that it's really important to master a certain craft, rather than spreading yourself too thin and not being able to master anything. Now I do agree with this, and I think it's really important to master your particular niche, but I also think it definitely can't hurt to gain a wider range of knowledge on other things out there, and this can just be a base level of knowledge. So if you are looking for a new skill to learn during this time, as I said, I think there are two angles that you can approach it at. Firstly, by looking for a skill that will increase your earning potential, or alternatively looking for something you can purely get enjoyment out of, which is really important for your mental well-being. But the good thing is, these two different approaches quite often cross over. So for example, say there's an instrument that you've always wanted to learn, but you've just never got around to doing it. Potentially down the line, because you really enjoy it, you actually get really good. And this could then lead on to opportunities like being commissioned to write a piece of music, for instance. But equally, it might work in a different way that you weren't necessarily expecting. So for example, say you meet a new client and you get to talking, then you find out that you've actually got common ground based on this new instrument that you've learnt. And then something as simple as that could actually lead on to building a really strong relationship with this person. As a lot of business is still done based on relationships and whether or not you can see yourself working with one another. So actually doing something purely for fun may actually be a far better use of your time than you might have thought. And also, no matter what it is, it's incredibly satisfying to learn a new skill and to see that progression. So as I said, this could be literally anything. So it could be learning an instrument, learning a language, or even reading a book, as that could give you a wider range of knowledge on a subject that might actually help you in the future. So for me during this time, I'm trying to gain knowledge on day trading in the stock market, and then hopefully I can gain the skill set to earn myself another source of income. So the next thing I want to talk about is getting on with those jobs that you've been putting off. Now I'm pretty sure this is something we're all guilty of, but there's a certain task that needs doing but you just put it off because it's not urgent. And it's just one of those things that you keep putting off and never get around to doing. So this could literally be anything, for example, updating your CV, sorting out your finances, or doing DIY jobs around the house. But why not use your time now to get on with the jobs that you can still do during this lockdown? So for me, something I've been putting off for months is changing a light fitting in my bedroom. Now to put it simply, I've been putting this off because it's just not the top of my priorities. The light I have currently is perfectly fine, it still produces light. It's just a very dated style which I'd quite like to change, but the really annoying thing is that it hangs down quite low and I quite often hit my head on it in the mornings. So a couple of months ago I actually bought a recessed spotlight to replace it with, but I just haven't got around to fitting it yet. The main thing that's been holding me back is that I don't know exactly how to do it, so it will take a bit longer than it should because of the learning curve. But the great thing about it is once I actually get on and do it, and I'll know how to do it again in the future if there's another light fitting that I want to change. So by simply just getting on with it now while I have the free time, it'll be saving me time and money in the future. And the great thing as well, because I'm replacing a really dated light fixture, it has the potential to actually add value to the property. And it should be improving my quality of life because I'm not going to be hitting my head each day. So if you have a think, I'm sure there's something that you've also been putting off, which you can now use this time to get on with. So the final thing I wanted to talk about is getting exercise. Now I know this isn't going to be applicable to everyone because I know a lot of people take their fitness really seriously out there, but I also know there's a lot of people in a similar situation to myself, where keeping up with general fitness drops to the lower end of my priorities. And this is basically because I plan to do so many things that inevitably something's going to slip, and for me it quite often seems to be the exercise that slips. It's one of those things that I quite often struggle to motivate myself to do because I'm not overweight or anything, but I do know that I could be a lot healthier if I just up my physical fitness. And there are so many benefits in terms of your mental health, energy levels and overall productivity. So for me, because I'm now working from home, I'm actually saving 2 hours each day on commuting time, which I now see as a perfect opportunity to dedicate that time for exercise. So for me this will be things like going for runs and going cycling, but I'm actually very lucky because I don't live in a town, so I can easily go out and do these things in the countryside. But even if you do live in a town or a city and you can't go outside in the same way, there are still so many fitness programs online or on apps that you can use to still get a good amount of exercise from home. So for example, things like strength training and yoga, But even if these things are new to you, you don't need to worry because there's so many resources online, like videos and apps that will show you exactly what you need to do. So there we have it, that basically does it for today guys. Thank you so much for watching if you did make it this far. And if you did enjoy it or feel like you learned something new, I'd really appreciate it if you could smash that like button, as it really helps me out. And do let me know what you think in the comments down below. I know all these ideas may not be applicable to everyone out there, but I do hope you can all gain at least one thing that's helpful from this video. And if you do enjoy this sort of content and want to see more, make sure that you hit that subscribe button down below and click that bell so you never miss a video. And don't forget to follow me on Instagram, I'll stick it on the screen now and in the link down below. And if you do have any questions for me, feel free to just message me on there. But that does it for today guys, take it easy, stay safe and keep saving.